Hello and welcome to Metro AV Tech Tips. I'm Brent in our studio.
And I'm Adam outside of the studio.
And not. By the way, this is the first time wearing these that I've actually heard the sounds from the intro.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah, because we're always watching it on the TV and we never actually hear it.
That is true.
So
yeah, you don't get to hear the music.
I heard the video cassette go in and make all the noises. And first time ever.
You actually got to hear it for once. That's pretty good.
Yes. So as everybody can see, we're not in the same place. I am back in the office. Adam is still out, conveniently located in an incredible off-site live location.
It's great color or great, lighting, great color. I mean, you really can't beat that, right? I mean, it just works so well.
I am incredibly jealous.
Yeah. Hey,
but
experts.
we're not here to talk about your luck.
Right.
What is today's topic, Adam?
Okay, well, today we are specifically talking about what is SDI. Now, this is actually the first part of a new kind of series that I wanted to get started, where we go over how it works or how stuff works. And because in our industry, there's a lot of stuff that we kind of take for granted that it just does work for the most part. Obviously, if there's something that doesn't
obviously
work,
not me.
I mean, yeah. So, but the point is that we have so many things that we have to use. So Ethernet, SDI, coax, RF, HDMI. That's one of the big ones that we have. That for the most part, you plug it in and it just kind of works. So yeah, Leo, they do look like earmuffs, don't they? I thought about putting my Polk Audio headphones on. But anyway, so the point is that I wanted to kind of start a series for us where we talk about how these things actually work. Because to be honest, once you know how something works, you can really troubleshoot it better. You can go over, okay, this is happening, this specific problem is happening over here. So because I know how it works, I'm able to say, this is probably what the problem is. Or here's a good idea of what the problem is. So that's really where this series came from, the whole idea behind it. So.
Okay, a couple of things. Go through your usual like, subscribe spiel.
Yeah. So, of course, everyone, like, share, subscribe, hit the little bell notification to let you know whenever we do go live, which, of course, right now is every Wednesday at 3 p.m. And every Friday at 3 p.m. as well. And that's Eastern time. Now, of course, the past few weeks, unfortunately, we had some issues that had to be taken care of. And so last Wednesday, we had a re-air of one of our top shows. I think it was HDMI 2.1 and What to Expect from about 2 years ago now, almost, or about a year and a half ago at least. And then we missed last Friday. So, but Brent, you are in the office, so this Friday you'll be doing things on your end. So
yes, everyone, I will.
Please come back this Friday at 3 p.m. to hear Brent talk about one of our products, one of our mini SDI products. So,
and since I never talk about our product, that's generally your job.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun, and it will obviously crash and burn.
Of course. Yeah. I'm expecting it, but that's okay. We'll get it figured out. So anyways, everybody, if you have questions about whatever it is that we're talking about today, feel free to leave it over in the comment section or the chat section over there. Or, of course, you can leave it down in the comment section below. So feel free to do that as well during any time for today's episode. And now that we're using StreamYard for this, we can put you up on the screen and actually talk about what your question is or what your comment is. So feel free to do that for us. We'll have some fun with that today. So
yeah, and actually, it's the StreamYard is. By the way, we're not paid by StreamYard, but it is a nice format.
It really is. I've really enjoyed it for what it's given us for these interactions and whatnot. So
let's get into today's topic, which is what is SDI.
Yes.
Now, I like SDI and I use it quite a bit, and we've used it here in the studio.
Yeah.
On some of our cameras.
Yep.
And there's a fair amount of surveillance from the old school days that's still out there on it. But let's start with the basics.
Yes.
Tell me what you know about SDI.
For the most part, the only thing that I really know for a fact is that SDI uses coax, or RG59 or RG6 coax. And technically it could go over, like an RG, what is it, 11? Is that what it is?
Yeah. or the Mini 59. We did a lot of Mini 59 stuff.
Yeah.
You know, the little tiny
Now it all
24 and
it all comes
25
down
gauge.
to a certain resistance, correct? Like you have to have a certain ohm.
Well, no,
rating?
well, you have to have a 75 ohm cable
Mhm.
and you have to have a 75 ohm terminal.
Right.
But let's step back even further. Tell me what SDI stands for, Adam.
Ooh. Oh wait, serial digital interface. Yeah.
Woo-hoo!
Hey, I got it right.
Look
All
at
right.
you. Look at you. So
Yeah.
I'm going to give a brief history so that everybody's up to where we are, because a little knowledge can go a long way with your customers. SDI obviously is not new. It was developed in the late 80s, early 90s for the broadcast world.
Right.
It was simply a cleaner way to get, at that time, 480i around the studio. Sony used it, Panasonic used it, they used it in the studios. This is pre-IP days, as a way to simplify wiring, audio, video, one connection. And with BNC, something that pretty much all their technicians knew how to do. Now, this wasn't real HD, it was still 480i.
Right.
But in the early 2000s, late 90s, they've dropped it into HD. Now, at this point, it was 2 wires to make it work. It was not convenient, but the cameras and the studio gear had that. Still not usable for residential, because most people don't have 2 identical length pieces of coax.
And I think that's one of the important things, right? It had to be identical lengths or within a certain threshold, right?
Really, really, really close.
Okay.
It wasn't until 06, really, that SDI could be applicable to our world. Now, having said that, the old guys like me, and there's a lot of us still out there, will remember the early 2000s when Pioneer and a couple of other companies actually offered SDI in some of their monitors. And there was a few companies out there that would modify your DVD player and put a 480i SDI port on it, so you could go pure digital out of your SDI directly into a modified AVR or a modified television.
Interesting.
But
So you were actually able to get a modification or something that would allow you to use the SDI format in a more residential application, just a high-end system, typically.
Now, it's not like they sold a bunch of those, but they were available through the CEA channels.
Okay.
And you saw them at some of the booths in the early 2000s. However, 2006, when 3G came out, the world changed dramatically.
Right.
First off, at this point, we can now support 1080p, which was as good as you could get up until a few years ago. Secondly, a single piece of coax. Now, even if you didn't have Cat 5 in your house, you probably had coax.
Yeah.
And because surveillance in the old days was truly 75 ohms, there was a lot of guys that already had the tools, the terminations, and the training to properly do it.
Right.
So there was a lot of SDI installs from 2008 really till about 2016. It was our go-to for up to 300 feet because it was kind of hard to mess up.
Well,
other than
one of that's is because of resolution, right? It was easy for us to do 1080p on one single run of coax because of the 3G, correct?
Absolutely. And for guys particularly that were just getting into extenders the first time,
right,
more often than not from the security side, they already knew how to do 75 ohms.
Yeah.
And coax. And as long as you don't get a little piece of copper wrapped around the stinger and you get, full slide on the terminal, it's probably going to work. Whereas you're still taking Cat 5 calls or category calls on extenders.
Yeah, it still happens. And actually, speaking of that, we've got a couple questions about this right now. So first off, Mammoth George, yes, I am in Stucco Land, and Leo, you nailed it on the head, also known as Florida. So it is for all you Yankees up there, and I'm allowed to say that because I'm a reformed Yankee, I guess. Maybe that's the best way to put it.
Transplanted.
I'm a transplant as well. It's a bristly 75 degrees here. I mean, I had to put on some warm shorts today, so
I had to put on my warm shorts.
So now Mammoth George does have a good question. He says, how long will SDI be with us in the face of NDI and the SMPTE 2110, which of course are both AV over IP solutions? And
we're going to get into that a little bit further into today's broadcast as we talk about 2082 and 2083,
Yep.
which you don't know about yet.
Nope, not yet. Not yet.
And in both cases, there are pros and cons to both formats.
Right.
I straight up out of the gate, I would much rather have somebody terminate a coax than a category cable, particularly as we move into 6A and who knows, 7, 8, 22. I don't know.
Sure.
Because the larger the gauge of the category cable, the harder it is to terminate.
Right. Now, I mean, of
coax
course, we do have
still pretty much coax.
Yeah, and I mean, granted, for the IP side of things, we are getting better and better ways to compress that data and to encapsulate it so that we can use lower bandwidths for what would become a higher bandwidth once it's decompressed on the other side, right?
Yes, absolutely. But that also plays into SDI as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
let's see.
It's not the transfer medium; it's the encode medium at that point.
Right. Let's see. 2082 and 2083. Brent will be 236 years old.
He is absolutely correct, by the way. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that.
Now, Michael Heiss, and actually, Brent, were you able to meet up with Michael when you were?
Yes,
out
we had a nice breakfast outside of Los Feliz on Fountain.
Okay, very nice.
Which was eating in LA was still semi-problematic. First off, there's parking. It's LA.
Sure.
And Mike and I both fought that one. But every place you go and was still all masked up and
yeah.
And nobody wants to give you a menu anymore. You have to do everything, scan and read something on your phone. And these are not young eyes. So I just said, you know what? I'll have 2 eggs, sausage of some variety, and water.
Yeah. So now back on topic, Michael was saying, of course, the SMPT 2110 and similar protocols will eliminate SDI and HDSDI in the long run. And I agree with that. To an extent. I mean, obviously your next comment, Michael, did say, of course, with the legacy devices being in there. Now, the house that I just moved into, I have Cat 3, barely Cat 3. It may as well be, 2 twisted pair, support 4 conductor twisted pair. And so is it
2 pair or 3 pair?
It's in some places it's 2 pair. In the old part of the house, it's 2 pair. In the newer part of the house, it is 3 pair. So I do have Cat 3 and one part of it, anyways. So the point is that in applications where you have an older location and you need to do some kind of live broadcast or HD video or even a little bit higher than that, because like you were saying before, we can do a little bit greater than 1080p right now, at least up to, I think it said 24 gigs. Is that right?
No. That is a standard. But that is not available.
So actually getting to that.
You can get up to 12 gigs now. You can actually support, and we're getting ahead of ourselves, but you can actually support 4K UHD
right
on SDI on 12G.
Yeah.
There are, however, some limitations. First off, there's not an actual interface created yet to go 2.0 to SDI 12G.
Okay.
Secondly, HDR support becomes incredibly problematic because SDI is not an EDID medium. In other words, the transmit side of an SDI typically will fake out the output of the source.
Okay. So it has its own EDID information really to send back to the source,
which is great to make the source happy, but it doesn't give the HDR info to the display.
Right.
Which has to go forward all the way to the display.
So not really any kind of pass back information. Nothing really coming.
Correct.
No
Correct.
return information.
And there are pros and cons to that. One of the advantages that 3G offered when it came out was the ability to go distance 100 meters, no problem.
Right.
For less money than HD base T, lower heat than HD base T. But there were some things that HD base T would do, and ultimately IP as well, that SDI did not easily do. IR, front and back. Now, you could do those on more expensive SDI units, and there was units that we sold that had EDID settings on them, and we'll get to that in a second. But the biggest advantage of SDI was substantial cost savings up to 1080p on a more robust, physically robust infrastructure.
Right.
And you could always extend the cable with a quality barrel.
Which is huge. I mean, let's be honest. For someone who, I've never cut my wires too short. It's good to have that option, right? Either for needing to extend the wires because of course they got cut too short, or an application where you need to extend it because we're plans change. We need
or noise. Despite the twisted nature of Cat5, it can pick up more external radiated noise than a coax can.
Right.
And there's a lot of times when coax was just a problem solver from noise.
Yeah.
We've all run across issues with vacuum cleaners, exercise bikes, wine coolers, air conditioners turning on and video blanking out.
Yes.
Now, HD base T is not as bad for that as the non-HD base T category extenders, but it can still happen. The coax ones rarely were affected by this. And all that is an RF field generated down the Romex that just is louder than the data on the cable.
So, and again, unfortunately, StreamYard, for some reason, blocks a couple of users' names, but they're saying, good news, there's a wire stretcher coming soon. We've got a wire stretcher coming, and we have an electron replacing.
Okay, first off, we don't need wire stretchers because it's all going to be wireless.
Of course. Yeah, exactly. So, okay, Brent. So now SDI, it's using coax, but it's not, it is or it's not an RF signal.
Oh, it's absolutely an RF signal.
Okay.
It's just a digital RF signal, and that doesn't change its nature. It's just changed how the signal is encoded and decoded. How it passes down the cable is the exact same way every other RF signal goes down a piece of coax.
Right.
It's amplitude.
So it's an amplitude rather than something like a like what HD base T uses, where it's a that PAM 16.
Well, that's still amplitude based. Also, you have different voltages.
Yes. So is
SDI,
it using kind of a similar idea?
SDI is just a raw conversion over to a single bit stream.
Gotcha.
And again, its biggest advantage was simplicity. Its biggest drawback was no guarantee of security.
Oh yeah, very true. Because it's very easy to just cut that, put a splice on it, and put a termination there, and you've got video, or whatever it is.
One of the things you'll notice is when you're looking at SDI, there's SDI for HDMI purposes, like we think about for distribution,
right? And
then SDI for cameras. And as we have noted, consumer SDI meant for AV distribution do not always work with the SDI cameras.
For like the cameras that we use there in the studio. Yeah.
Taking it back to HDMI, we were not effective. We had to go to a product purpose built for that. Yeah. Now, part of that is when you look at HDMI for our world, for distribution, there's an EDID emulation at the transmit side.
Right.
Because a source has to see EDID in our world. Cameras don't.
Yeah.
They're just outputting whatever.
It's just pushing the information.
Right. So our world has to see EDID. Now, this allowed some things to happen that may or may not have been happy in the HDMI world. For example, if you were in a bar situation where you needed to transmit a satellite receiver to more than the allotted HDCP key sets.
Sure.
An installer could simply put an SDI system between the source and the splitter. And at that point, the source only saw the transmit EDID and HDCP.
Okay. So
we certainly would never encourage that because that bypasses the intent of HDCP.
Correct. Yeah. And you're really not supposed to do that at all. And
and we would never encourage that.
So so does that create a different problem then because of EDID? Or do we run into scaling
yes,
issues
it can.
And whatever else?
Well, not scaling issues because at that point you have to set your source to whatever your displays can handle.
Right.
Where it did run into issues with guys trying to run between a source and an AVR. Okay. PlayStations would not work over SDI because they had to see the audio flag from the AVR to know what to put them in.
Gotcha.
Now, there were ways around that. There were SDI, and we sold them at the time for probably a half a dozen years, that had EDID settings at the source side, meaning you could select resolution and audio format on the unit,
right,
on the transmit unit, that would feed back to the source.
right.
And then at the receive side, you would also set what it was going to output to make that device happy.
Right.
Those ones were probably twice to twice and a half more than the basic simple units.
Well, because we're having to emulate different EDID solutions.
A lot of stuff, right.
In those things. So, yeah.
And that one also carried IR.
Yeah.
Backwards from the display to the source.
But in that, those had two, you needed two coax runs for those, didn't you?
No. Nope. It just overlaid it.
Gotcha.
Now, and things we were looking at was single point power. And the cost to do that was just, by the time we had figured that out and looked at the cost of it, HD-based was becoming a thing. Right. And we knew that 4K was on the horizon.
Right. So at that point, it was kind of a moot point to continue it anyways. So
yes, it was.
Yeah. So when we look at SDI then, so we've got a similar system to a HD-based T, to where they are taking it and doing a pulse amplitude modulation, I'm assuming, and basically turning that digital signal into an RF signal on the coax.
It's still digital, still ones and zeros, just a lot of them.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So that's why we're doing the modulation, because we're able to do multiple ones and zeros at once, kind of, for that signal. And you're not really doing multiple ones and zeros at once. It's go back and watch the HD-based T episode. That's the best way to describe it, because go back.
Are you trying to do math, Adam?
I was dangerously close to doing math on today's episode, so we'll go ahead and slow down a little bit. But so with SDI,
now, where would you use SDI?
Well, I mean that kind of goes with the question that I had before I answer that. Before I ask that, does it create any other problems? Like, do we have grounding problems? So a lot of times we have like subwoofers that use coax, and they can pick up a ground loop fairly easily. And of course, we're running 60 cycles here in the States, or 50 cycles here anywhere else.
The ground loop that you're hearing with subwoofers is not coming from the cable,
right?
Per se, it's coming from the connectivity to the outside world.
Gotcha.
From the cable company, that's where that's coming from. That's not because you're using coax in the house. It's not because the coax is near a piece of Romex. It's because ground issues at the house at the street in relation to the house.
Gotcha.
Now, the only issues I've ever come across with SDI is I want more than 1080p. Okay, that's a problem. Or I want 480p. And that's always been an issue for 3G, because 3D, the original HD version supported 480p. But when they went to 3G, it disappeared. I can't tell you why.
Yeah, I don't know. Because it kept the 480i.
Yes.
But not the 480p.
I can't tell you why. Don't know. But it does do up to 1080p. Now, when 6G was first introduced 12 years ago,
right?
Maybe.
Uh-oh. Pardon me. Goodness gracious.
Well, it's an interesting answer, Michael. And normally I would agree with you because of all the capabilities we have now. But I still take, and I swear to God, on a daily basis, all we need is 1080p on this job. But it's got to work every time, particularly in commercial applications. And the SDI really does a good job in that application. Now, let's kind of step forward, because we mentioned a little bit about 6G and 12G. 12G actually will support the full 4K capabilities, assuming you can get it into it. Now, that means you're going to do it from, wow, that's loud.
Yep, sorry about that. We're done. We're good.
You're going to do it from a camera or something like that, because the HDMI 2.0 interface, to the best of my knowledge and research, still does not exist. And there's a couple of reasons for that, not the least of which is HDCP 2.2. Because it's a very complex algorithm to make that function. And since SDI is not a two-way communication process, you have to deal with that.
Yeah. So
I would still, in a bar situation, and distribution in a church, and distribution in a small school, and non-4K distribution for video surveillance, stuff like that, it is still a very solid interface that is still used. We still sell the components and the guys still put them in.
Yeah.
We don't take a lot of service calls on them, which makes me happy.
Yeah, of course. So Randall here has got a good point. He's saying that SDI is more appropriate than HDBaseT in longer runs. And I would agree with that because we can go really far with SDI just because of the nature of coax, right?
It can go 100 meters without a problem.
Yeah. And in fact, even a little bit further than that, I think.
Well, depends on your resolution at that point, but RG6 is rated to 100 meters.
Gotcha.
Mini 59 was rated to 225 feet, in a little tiny 24-25 gauge.
Right.
Now, I like this one. It just dropped out. There we go. Switching. Yes. Because all the clock's handled by the transmitter. It's not handled by anything else.
Oh, right.
Because there's no EDID.
Right. And so the switching on that would be almost instantaneous because there's no, it's clocked instead of synced, right? There's a clock that's handling all of it.
The real question is, are they going to push SDI forward into real 2.0 domain?
Or 2.1, for that matter.
Well, the furthest you're looking at now is 24 gig, and at 12, you can pretty much support the HDMI 2.0 world.
Right.
24 gigabits is quite a ways off. I don't have the dates on the email I sent you, but it's not anytime soon.
So now we just got back from Infocom a couple weeks ago. And what it felt like at Infocom versus the residential side, so the commercial side rather than residential, is residential, there's kind of a need or a desire for the higher resolutions because of the watching environments. It's more of an enjoyment environment rather than a need to get content somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we looked at the Infocom, it was still fairly common to see 1080p being the go-to resolution for a lot of things. And for that, so your statement of whether or not they're going to bring it into HDMI 2.1, like the bandwidth requirements and whatnot for that makes a lot of sense actually, because we're still, rolling out 4K into a lot of those applications. You look at the displays. You walk into McDonald's now. Every single McDonald's has a video display for their menu board. Every single Wendy's, everything, all the fast food places that you go into, you are getting the, a menu of some kind on some kind of display. But when you look at those displays, they're 1080p and possibly even 720p, depending on when it was, put in. And truthfully, for those, there's no need to really do anything bigger than that, other than just, hey, look, we've got a 4K menu board above our, cashiers. So
right now, to Michael's statement, as IP, particularly new builds.
Yes.
If you're building a new place, you're going to lay in the IP infrastructure, because at that point you can use the same switch for everything, just partition it out, as we discussed in an episode 6 months ago.
Yep.
8 months ago. So that makes absolute sense. If you're starting from scratch on a brand new install, yes.
Yeah.
I would be doing IP, but I would still be pulling coax as a backup.
Yeah.
Because it's still a great backup. First off, you've got SDI, which is great. Secondly, if you're at a greater than 15 meters from your source, eARC becomes an issue. So it gives you an audio back to your AVR.
Right.
It can be IR. You can do MoCA. There's a lot you can do with coax that I don't want people to think it's last year's technology. Are you going to use it every time? Maybe not.
No.
But you know what? It's great to have that in your pocket if you need it.
It's
a great
just
tool.
In case. Yeah. And coax is so cheap now that relative anyways.
Yes.
To everything else.
Yes.
But Randall's saying here in a sports bar environment, 1080p still rules the roost because of DirecTV. And honestly, if your source content is only 1080p, there's no point in doing anything 4K or higher than that. And so in those applications where
other than new installations.
Yes, correct. Now in those applications, but even still, the new installations, in a lot of cases, they're just putting DirecTV in and running with that. So you only have 1080p to deal with.
And we still sell a lot of 1080p extenders over category cable.
Right. And Mammoth, you make a really good point with this. When you have 1080p as don't build your system based on a 1080p design, build your system on the 4K or higher design. But if you don't need to use all of that bandwidth or all of your hardware that you have in place, then yeah, you don't have to worry about it. So you do make a good point with that. So let's get back to that's actually a really good point. The experts are saying they use their coax for low voltage power.
It's 18 gauge. You can absolutely send 12, 24, 48 volts down it.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And of course, we're also saying here, and again, let's see, where are you? Mark from Soundscape is saying most broadcasts are still 1080p. And yeah.
No, 720.
Sorry, 720p. I missed it. Yeah, there we go. 720p. So yeah, you are correct. In a lot of cases, it matters, but it doesn't matter in a lot of cases. So
I will say, Adam, I'm really digging StreamYard.
Having the comments come up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can actually read them.
Yeah, it's nice, right? So, all right. So we've got 3G SDI. And that's what our mini SDI uses on
which is 1080p.
We have, right. So we got 1080p there. So what do we have beyond that?
Well, there's 6G and 12G, which are real.
Yeah.
We do not need them yet because they don't properly support the higher bandwidth EDIDs and HDCPs that we would need in our world. That doesn't mean that somebody isn't going to figure it out, but they have to look at the market. And let's face it, right now, if somebody doesn't have to build a piece of silicone that they can't sell 20 million of tomorrow, they're not.
You're right. So actually, Mammoth is making.
I don't know if you saw the news this week, but
they're recommending 4K displays as it renders the fonts better, and it's easier for older eyes, right? And I think you've got yeah, exactly. So, so when we have the higher resolution capabilities, and so really I think this episode has really kind of become a debate of whether or not SDI has a place today.
It's still valid.
Yeah, and honestly, it's one of those things where it feels more like if it's a new job, put the coax in there as a backup, but don't design around it and don't design for the SDI. However, if you're going to a job site where you're doing some kind of upgrade or it's a retrofit and the coax is already there, if that means that if the client says I only want 1080p, if that means that you don't have to get into an attic and drop some wires through a wall, I would take it. I would go ahead and put in an SDI extender, run that signal at 1080p, and everybody's happy at that point. Now, if they're wanting specifically to do an upgrade, that's different, right? If you're doing an upgrade, then we want to go back and actually run some wires.
Good luck with that on a bar.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Depending on the design. I mean, if we're going to Buffalo Wild Wings, everything's open, right? We can get to the scaffolding and do pretty good. But if we're talking
have you ever met a bar that actually wanted to spend money on infrastructure improvements?
This is true. This is very true. And well, to an extent, I would almost say that some of the bigger ones are more open to that because they understand the value of it. But I can appreciate that. And yeah, that is a true statement. The experts will, not to call anyone out specifically, but for the trunk slimmers that don't know networking, SDI is great for that. Let's be honest. If you have, I won't call them trunk slammers. What I will say is, if you have an inexperienced integrator who has not needed to get into the networking yet, and they will, and they should, but if they haven't gotten into the networking side of things yet, SDI is great. It's plug and play. You plug it in, and so long as you did your good termination on everything, which again we've got our termination episode coming up.
Oh, and speaking of that, bring up your the page on the terminals.
Yes. So let's do this here. Make sure I did it right. I think I did. Hit this button here. Don't show these tips again. Come on now. Almost there. And share. Okay.
No, that's not it.
That's not it. Go to the next one. There we go.
The next one. So, okay. When you're doing SDI, a couple of things are very important. Under no circumstances can you use F to BNC adapters or RCA to BNC adapters. This means if you've got an RCA cable in the wall that's a stranded center conductor and you are not qualified to do a really good solder upgrade on that to BNC 75 ohm, you're not putting SDI in.
Right.
You actually have to terminate the cable with a 75 ohm terminal, not a 50 ohm terminal. And then it works. At 50 ohms, it will not work, plain and simply. And 50 ohms looks identical to 75 ohm. It's just slightly different in its electrical properties, specifically for testing gear.
Yeah.
And really generally radio broadcast.
Yeah, you really need to have a good termination with anything that we do. Now, we talk specifically about video for what we say you need a good connection for, but anything you do nowadays, you need to make sure you've got a good connection. And if you're doing something where you already have a termination where it's an F connector or something like that, where you put an adapter on the end of it, if you put that adapter on there, it's like you're throttling what's there, right? You're
changing the impedance. When you look at the top one, which is the F to BNC, you think, okay, that's a 75 ohm F and a 75 ohm BNC, but the device overall is not.
Right.
So it's not going to work. And RCAs are nowhere near 75 ohm. Even if it's on a 75 ohm cable, it's not 75 ohm.
No.
So what you need is a true 75 ohm terminal. And of course, our Metro AV sales guys can help you with that.
Yep.
And the compression.
So also make sure that
it's together.
Yeah, make sure it's an actual compression. Don't use the twist-on kind. The
screw-on ones. No,
you're not getting a good fit. It's like the pass-through style RJ45s. I don't know how many times we have talked about those on our episode, but you really, honestly, should not use those types of terminations. Which we have an entire episode coming up again to talk about that. So just the different types of terminations, things to look for, things not to do, things to do. But in general, just making sure that everything is kosher. Just if you use a twist on, you're not going to get good connection for it. You're going to run into problems. So do a compression fit whenever possible. Okay,
so let's get back to today's legitimate question.
Right.
Would you do SDI on a job site now?
I think my answer, and I think I defined that a little earlier, I think my answer would be if it's already there, if it's within the guidelines of what the customer is looking for, yeah, I would probably go ahead and do that. If it winds up being something where it's a new installation or a complete remodel where I can run new wires fairly easily, then yeah, I would say run the gamut of wires, run some coax, run a couple category wires, put an HDMI in, put an AOC cable in if you need HDMI. That's honestly going to be your best bet in a lot of cases, because most of the distances that you're needing to travel are covered by an AOC HDMI. Now, if you're needing to use coax for other reasons, then, of course, run the coax and have that there.
Yeah, but I love coax for ARC.
Yeah. Yeah, and for the ARC, I mean, obviously we're running into issues because with eARC, the difference is you're not just doing 5.1. Now we're doing Atmos in many cases with that. So if you were going to run audio over a digital coax connection, you're going to lose that. But in many cases, you're not actually going to be using Dolby Atmos for those types of connections. Yet. Well, and even yet, it's not even so much a yet thing. It's just what are you using? Okay, we're using a Sonos soundbar. And yes, Dolby Atmos on a soundbar, a stereo or a 3.1 soundbar, does sound better than a regular Dolby digital signal going back to it, or whatever it is, or DTS or something. However, it's not like an amazing difference yet. I think yet is the point with that.
Speaking of data throttling, is there any chance you can grab that bird?
I don't know where he's at. He's over there
Because
somewhere.
he could use a good throttling.
So you can't hear. There's a lawnmower going off over there, but you can hear the bird. So that's kind of interesting. That the microphone array in this system it takes out the droning sounds, but it keeps the bird going. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, so what about you, Brent? What's your choice on SDI? Are you using SDI in a new job? I know you're using SDI now, but if someone comes to you and says, "Hey, I want this done,"
well, and you and I have laid this out multiple times in the show, and this is one of the few places you and I completely agree.
Yeah.
A fiber, an AOC fiber.
Yep.
A Cat 6 or a Cat 6A. A Cat 5e, just because it's good for data and other stuff, and less money, and a piece of coax. That is my standard TV jack pack.
Right.
Because it gives me a tremendous amount of flexibility. And let's face it, to the vast majority of people, as long as they can get content to that TV, they really can't tell the difference, I'm sorry, between 1080p and 4K on broadcast.
Right.
So if all you have is a piece of coax and you can make SDI work for that football game this weekend,
right?
Yeah, make it work.
Yeah.
And by the way, just so you know, I noticed this week channel numbers are now an option on the DirecTV streaming app.
Are they? Wonderful.
And I just noticed that this week for the first time.
Nice.
It's either you have the option of alpha or channel numbers.
So it's a sorting structure then, so you can actually sort it.
And it sorts them out the same way they are on DirecTV normally.
So Randall's saying here for our termination episode, look up the Twinax or Twinax and Triax termination procedure.
And they've done that.
I just Googled that, and what is that? What is that?
Okay, Twinax was used for PC networking.
Okay. Yeah, I see it here for SFP modules. Huh.
Look, I'm the old man. I did it.
That's really cool. You know, look, there's if you all get a chance, and again, there's a YouTube channel that I watch, and really great guy. He's super dry in his explanations for things. He's got kind of that dry humor in a lot of it. It's a very British humor kind esque type thing. But he goes back and he looks at the history of different technologies and goes into detail about how they work. It's actually called, let me go to the channel here. It's Technology Connections. Check them out. Check this guy out. He's got some really cool stuff in there. But that Twinax and Triax system would be something that would be right up his alley. And I love hearing about the history of these things because they're not widely used, but they're stepping stones to what we have today, right? I mean, things like that are the older technology that developed into something different, and now we have today's technology because of that, right? I mean, Twinax and Triax, I'm assuming it's just not used that much anymore just because it's just not as feasible to use.
Well, you can carry, there's nothing that actually uses that data transmission format anymore.
Yeah, it showed that there's still some SFP stuff on there, but that's kind of where that is. Interesting. Randall's saying that they used SDI last year when COVID hit to get 5 cameras to the booth and implement a video switcher arrangement for starting up a streaming service quickly. Well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as we learned, what resolution are you using for streaming? 720 and 1080.
Yeah. Well, in that case, I mean, it works really well. Now, they can do things like, for instance, we had our
Blackmagic piece.
Our Blackmagic piece that we've now replaced with one of the newer Blackmagic that doesn't have SDI. It's only HDMI on that, but it was a different use case. That camera was really cool because it actually had multiple SDI outputs, so that you could have like inputs. I thought it had outputs.
Yeah, remember it had multiple inputs and 2 outputs, along with an HDMI out.
Yeah, and then they're saying here also the Twinax SFP cable from Dell. Yeah, that's the one I was talking about. So they are still using Twinax in a lot of cases. So that's actually really cool stuff on that. I love hearing stuff like that. So and honestly, I feel like that's what SDI is. a little bit. It's that technology that gave us a stepping stone into something else.
And it is.
But I feel like it's still around because it was and is so. I think the biggest thing with SDI is the fact that it's so easily field terminated, right?
Well, and that's what killed it. In the prior to HDMI, there was a push. Prior to FireWire,
there was
a push. Prior to FireWire, there was a push for SDI to be the high def connection format.
Right.
And it wasn't the people that made technology that didn't want it. It was the lawyers that didn't want it.
Right.
Because the thing is, with the HDMI terminal came an HDMI receiving section. And those chips had to come from an authorized HDMI approved vendor,
right.
Which meant that every one of those chipsets had security built into them.
Yeah, exactly.
SDI was already a mature technology, and there was no guarantee that it was going to be implemented. Now, they could have put HDCP in it, but then they would have had to change SDI into a two-way communicating system, which it never was meant to be.
Sure. Interesting. Well, Brent, we are coming up on 45 minutes, and
woohoo!
Unfortunately, I have another meeting that I have to get to on this one, so we're going to have to cut today's episode a little short. And so we'll have to do that. But I think today was a really great topic for us to talk about.
This is the last time I give you the stop button.
I do have the stop button. So with that, I think today was a really good episode. I think it's a really good topic for us to talk about technology like this and how it works. Essentially, just kind of to recap what it is, let's see real quick here. Amphenol triax connectors are used in applications where maximum RF shielding and minimum noise radiation is required. So mission critical locations. So I'm assuming like the military and also
airports,
high end or high security areas, probably where they need to have that connection, right? And not have any kind of signal degradation on it. So, but anyways, I think that we should continue on. Talking about subjects like this and how things work on that. And I want to do more research on these types of things. So, but with that, Brent.
Well, now, quick question. Are you going to be back in the office next week, or are you still out?
That's up for debate right now. We're still trying to work out scheduling plans and everything else, but I'm hoping to be back in the office next week for next week's episode. And I believe next week we have a special guest. We do have a special guest next week. Next week we have Joe.
It's the multimeter.
Yep, it's our multimeter episode. So we've got Joe Padula from Installer Institute coming in next week for next Wednesday's episode, where we are talking about multimeters or.
So basically, I don't need you.
No, you could do next week's episode.
You just stay home. Joe and I play around with the meters and the probes and have a fine time, and you can just stay home.
Well, you tell Jesse that I got the okay from you that I can stay home that day, right? Okay, cool. All right, that works.
You think that carries weight, do you?
Yeah, of course, right? Yeah,
no.
So come back next week for that episode. I'm really excited about it because while I know how to use a voltometer, I don't think I know how to use it to its fullest potential. And so I'm really looking forward to that episode because I feel like we're going to have some really interesting things come up. And if you all have maybe some new technicians or some technicians that need a refresher on certain things, tell them to tune in to next week's episode where we'll be talking about those things. They will have an actual instructor. This guy is an actual teacher.
And is very good.
Yeah, he's very, very good. He was on the episode where we fixed my math on ohms. On impedance. So definitely come in and
they have a pill for
questions. What's that now?
They have a pill for that.
Well, that's that. Luckily, one of us has to use that, but it's not me.
Sure.
So, well, with that, Brent, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. Everybody, thank you so much for checking in with us today. As always, if you have any questions about anything that we have talked about today, feel free to leave it down in the comment section down below. We do monitor those, and we do respond to those as quickly as we possibly can. And also, if you have any questions about anything else that has anything to do with AV or, I mean, honestly, just about anything, we love talking with you people out there that are watching our videos. It means the world to us that you all come and track us down at shows and let us know that you watch.
Yeah, I had some people come out and talk to me in both Dallas and Houston. Hey, watch your shows. It's like,
yeah,
man, thank you. It is nice to know that it matters.
Yep, we really appreciate that. And if you have ideas for new topics for us to talk about in upcoming episodes, please let us know. Shoot us an email. Of course, you can email me at adam.rogers@metroav.com, or you can email Brent at
brent.mccall@metroav.com.
So, or of course, you can give us a call. 386-492-8584 is our tech support line. That's usually the best way to get in touch with us. So you can always ask for either myself or Brent, and we can go to you there. What is that? Here we go. Let's talk about iodophores. Do you know what those are?
Oh, is that EI or EL?
EI.
I don't know what an iodophore is. Quick,
what's an iodophore?
It sounds like a joke.
Huh?
What's an iodophore?
What's a Henway?
What's a Grecian urn? About
Yeah.
What's a Grecian urn? Oh, minimum wage.
Minimum wage. What's a Henway? It's about
that's what iodophore sounds like.
Fun ways to run cable. Leo's got a good one here. Fun ways to run cable. Now hold on, because we need to define that. Are we talking about fun ways to run cable or the correct way to run cable? Because there's lots of fun ways to run cable.
Are you dressing as a clown? Are you going underneath the rafters? Are you
right?
wrapping the rafters? Now,
ooh.
And I know Leo's been down this road. You take a new kid out and he pulls some wires and you start looking, you realize at least one of them's underneath the truss.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And it's always at the middle, not at either end.
Nope. Somewhere in the middle.
I know Leo's dealt with that one.
Yep. Let's see. Mammoth George is saying giant ancient light valve projectors.
Ooh. Well, you never saw the Electro Home 8500 that used to be at Bill's house. It was sold under the Vidicron brand.
Right.
Which is big, giant thing on a motorized lift because it was so heavy. And our Sony G50s or G90s.
Right.
Not Infinities, Sonys.
So Leo's saying that and it was a video projector used to create theater-sized images from an analog video signal. Ah, man. Interesting. Okay. Let's see. Basic technology was used of electrostatic charges to deform an oil surface. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right, everybody. We got to go ahead and close.
Yeah, Leo, you got me on that one.
Yeah.
I swear to God, I thought it was an inside joke.
All right. We'll see y'all next time. Thanks for checking in with us. As always, reboot early.
Reboot often.
Don't cut your wires too short.
You can call tech support.
Turn off CEC. We'll see y'all next time, everybody.
Turn off CEC. I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
He's Adam. We're out of here.
Bye.